from Playmates.
Alright, time for some more turtle talk. This time we're talking Wave 4, 1991. So last time I covered my favorite era of Turtles toys, which was 1990, which just had the largest wave, greatest character sculpt, so many cool characters introduced. This time it's very similar. It's a lot more of the same kind of bright colors and crazy sculpts and cool character designs, but it's a lot smaller. You know, they don't have 14 characters like the last one did. We're back to 10 characters, and 2 of which are from a sub-side series, so count that if you will. I'm only counting unique characters. This was the point where the line started to change a little bit. Now in this wave we got way more turtle variants. Like, you know, we got turtles dressing up as everything under the sun. And for the rest of the line, that would start to increase more and more. We get more and more turtles each time, and less original characters, which I thought was a bummer, because I always liked the original characters more. And to be honest, each year they added more turtles, the line started selling worse and worse. So I don't know why they downed the number of original characters and upped the number of turtles when the line sold best when they had a ton of original characters. Now after the last video, I've had to take some mental notes because there's a little bit of things I screwed up. So from now on, it all really comes down to I gotta watch my video before I post it, because it doesn't matter how many times I watch the scenes over and over again in production and everything when I'm editing the video together. If I don't watch the video in its entirety before uploading it to YouTube, I'm probably gonna miss some stuff. Like maybe me coughing and repeating something 3 times when I'm ranking the figures, or me accidentally leaving the sound from the camera on for a quick second during a certain shot when discussing a certain figure. And it's little things like that. You know, I'm still new to YouTube, so I gotta learn from my mistakes, I guess, because I didn't know. I thought if you screw up a video on YouTube, you could just upload a different video, you know, fix it, re-upload it as the same file, same URL, same comments and likes and everything. But that's not the case. Apparently, if you screw up a YouTube video and you want to replace it, you have to actually put up a whole new video, all new likes, comments, everything. So I didn't know that. So now I know. So I'll be a little more careful now to make sure that I don't clear my throat a million times at some point because I forgot to edit it out because the video was over an hour long. So we'll try not to do that this time. My apologies. Well, anyway, even though this wave isn't as cool as Wave 3 was, it's still awesome. It's still a huge part of my childhood, and the figures were still pretty damn cool. We just got a little bit of them, but this was still during the height of Turtle Mania. We still had Secret of the Ooze that year. Like, in retrospect, it wasn't as cool as the year before, but during the time when I was living through it, it just felt like things were getting cooler and cooler. So let's just jump in and start looking at these guys, and I'll tell you all about them. So as was the case with Wave 2, I'm going to start with the villains in Wave 4 because they're more important than the characters who were introduced as heroes for the most part. But as was the case with Wave 3, there's plenty of characters who are kind of unclear if they're heroes or villains. It differs between the cartoon show canon, the toy line canon, and the Archie comic canon. So it's a little bit of a mess. So I'm going to do those guys later before I get to the heroes. So we're going to start off with this guy. This is Ground Chuck. Ground Chuck is kind of a part of a duo with Dirtbag, the mole. These guys were almost like the Rocksteady and Bebop of this wave that never really took off at all, but they were attempted to be. They were the main new villains and draw for the big special they had on TV called Planet of the Turtleoids. And that special crammed in 4 new figures from this wave into one special. So we're going to look at Ground Chuck first, because of the 2 of them, he was the one that I owned as a kid, whereas Dirtbag was my brother's. So let me just talk about Ground Chuck first. Ground Chuck, for some reason, it took me way too long to get the name. It's not like that clever or cryptic. It's just Ground Chuck, like ground beef. Like, I don't know why I didn't get that. For some reason, it wasn't until like 5 or 6 or 7 years ago that I finally figured out that was the joke. I always wondered why his name was Ground Chuck. I would think of like a woodchuck or a groundhog, you know, I just mixed the 2 names together. And I was always like, shouldn't that be Dirtbag's name? Or Maybe it was, and they thought Dirtbag was a better name and they switched it, but no, I'm just an idiot. He's named after chopped beef. When I was younger, I always thought his name would be better as Bullseye, but honestly, that's so obvious. He's covered in bullseyes, as you can see, and he comes with a crossbow, that Ground Chuck's a little more creative, even though Bullseye would have been more suitable. I got Ground Chuck for my birthday one summer when I was in Vermont visiting my grandparents, as we always did in July for my birthday. All in the same morning, I got Wyrm, Sergeant Bananas, and Ground Chuck, and also some other, turtle variants. And the Ground Chuck I had as a kid actually had silver hair. It wasn't painted green like it was meant to be. The package, the artwork showed him with green hair, and on the back of the packaging, the cross-sell, it always showed the characters way more painted than they actually were when you got them. It was just obnoxious. They would just show so much color on the characters that wasn't on the figure, just rub it in. This is how good they should look, but they don't look that good. And sometimes it didn't even make any sense. They would show Bebop's trash can lid shield as this metallic gold color. It's well, who the heck has a metallic gold royal holy trash can? It doesn't even make any sense. If it was metallic silver, that would be awesome looking, but yeah, sometimes they just put the color variants on the back just to mess with you. But regardless, it was clear to me that Ground Chuck was supposed to have green hair, but he didn't have green hair on my version of the figure. He had silver hair. And then I remember when I came back to school in September, I was young. I was just starting school. This was kindergarten, because it was on the little short bus, I think. They used to use those for kindergarten in my schools. And then once you got to first grade, you were on a full bus. Then when I went back to school in the fall, I was on the bus, and there was this kid who had gotten a ton of Ninja Turtles over the summer too. He was telling me, oh, I got this guy and that guy. And I was so happy because I got a ton. I was oh yeah, I got this guy, this guy, this guy. And then he was let's bring him in. My mom didn't let me bring mine in, but he brought his in. I remember on the bus we were looking at them, and it pissed me off actually, because not only did he just get way more figures than I did, which is looking back at it, I got a ton of figures. I got so much stuff for my birthday. I had no right to be pissed off. But the thing that pissed me off was this kid had a green-haired Ground Chuck. And that was the moment where I realized, oh wait, you can actually get a better painted variant of this figure. And that annoyed me a lot. Ground Chuck is oddly kind of short and stubby for a bull. When you really look at it, he has really short legs. He's kind of... I understand they're trying to make him look, squat and menacing and wide and bulky. But with the scaled down size, that's not really the look he gives. With those stumpy legs, it kind of just makes it look like he's a short guy. Like he's Danny DeVito height or something. I mean, he's a bull. And then the mole that he hangs out with is way bigger than him. A mole and a bull. How do you mess that up? I get the feeling Ground Chuck was supposed to be really big, but anytime there was exceptionally big characters, they usually came out looking small because they'd be so wide and beefed up that they couldn't really make them taller or the figure would be humongous. So they'd just end up scaling it down and the character would end up being kind of small. And Ground Chuck definitely suffers from that. I always found it weird how even though he's a villain, he's wearing a Wrath face on him. Why are you wearing Ninja Turtles memorabilia if your mission is to defeat the Ninja Turtles? Ground Chuck does have this weird sort of cyber cowboy bounty hunter kind of thing going on. He's he seems like he's supposed to be a cyber bounty hunter, futuristic and stuff. He's a cyborg. And they did this futuristic bounty hunter kind of motif a couple times in this line. I feel like it was a little overdone. They did it again with Scale Tail the next year. And there was even the unreleased figure, Neutralizer, who never made it towards the planning stage until the 2012 series where they actually made him a character, which was awesome. But he was basically the same thing. He was like a cyber bounty hunter or cyber cowboy kind of thing. So it was a bit weird that they did that so many times. I don't fully get what Ground Chuck's theme is supposed to be, but I guess what it's supposed to be is that, he's an archer. Definitely has a Western look to him. But I guess he's kind of like an archer, but at the same time, he's almost like a rifle. He's got perfect aim. He's got the crosshair for an eye and everything. So he's a futuristic, perfect archer, I guess. He actually looks like something that would have come out of Brave Star or the Cowboys of Moo Mesa. And actually, ironically, a lot of the guys who worked on this toy line supposedly went on to work on the Cowboys of Moo Mesa. So there you go. I also like that he's red, clearly because of the Chicago Bulls. Even much later in the 90s, when Ty Beanie Babies came out, they made their bulls red as well. Everyone just made their bull characters red in the 90s because that was the power of Jordan, man. I mean, heck, look at Slam Dunk and Don. If anyone ever questions the legacy of Jordan, just tell them, all bulls were red because of that guy, man. Now let's talk about Dirtbag. Dirtbag is supposed to be a mole, even though he really looks absolutely nothing like a mole. He looks more like a weasel or a badger with no patterns on his fur or something. Like he's got this long kind of polecat tail and like just this weird snout that he just really doesn't look like a mole. I don't think they really knew what moles looked like when designing this guy, or they just didn't care and they thought that a regular mole look would be weird, so they just kind of made him whatever. He's clearly like a miner. He's got some very cool weapons, like a gun that doubles as a jackhammer and stuff, like clever stuff. And I like that he has this pack on his back that you can plug all of his weapons into. As I said earlier, Dirtbag was my brother's figure, but there is a story I remember where I technically got Dirtbag first, but it wasn't really mine. In early years in school, all the moms in the school would kind of like network and, you know, they were always involved with each other and setting up birthday parties for their kids and getting all the other kids to come over. Like oh, we're going to have it at this place and you got to bring everybody from his class. And later on, I mean, it was just like, just the kids you were friends with would be at your parties. It wasn't this like weird organized thing that was going on all the time. So there was this one kid in school named JJ who was like, this was my least favorite kid. He was such an asshole. He was just, I got bullied a lot as a kid. I was kind of like the runt of the whole class. Like I was the one that everybody picked on. But this kid was like on a whole other level of bully. Eventually I ended up slapping him in the face and he actually never bullied me ever again. That was years later. But it was this kid's birthday party, and I already hated him. Like, the year I met him, he was already a jerk. So I hated this kid so much. But I had to go to his birthday party, and I had to pick out a toy for him. We stopped at Toys R Us. My mom drove me and was like, all right, you got to get a toy for him. Because nobody knew this kid was a piece of garbage. Like, this kid was terrible. This kid got expelled when he was in, like, the 5th grade. But, yeah, we had to stop and get him a toy. And she knew that Ninja Turtles were the big thing because I was obsessed with them and she had to buy them for me for years. So she went to the store and she's like, pick out some new one. Pick out one that's new and popular and stuff. And I saw the whole wall and it was just all the new wave. It was like Ground Chuck and, you know, Wyrm and all of them. But I already had those ones. The one I didn't have was Dirtbag. And I grabbed Dirtbag just because it was like, ooh, we don't have that one. But then it was like killing me because it's like, oh wait, we still won't have this one because it's going to this kid that I hate. So we got this figure and then I was sitting in the passenger seat. I had to hold his package the whole time. And I was just staring at it like, I want this, I want this. There has to be some way for me to keep this. And I hated this kid a lot. And I mean, I wasn't really close with any of the kids in my grade. Like I said, they kind of all made fun of me. So I was like looking for a reason to not have to go to this party. And I was like asking my mom, like, can I just not go? Like, I don't know. I don't really want to go to this. I don't feel like going to this party and everything. And eventually she was like, all right, whatever. You can stay home. Don't go have fun. She's like, but you are dropping that toy off. And that like was like, oh, like I was kind of hoping like we could just keep the toy instead. So I think we stopped somewhere. I dropped the toy off with them, and then I'm pretty sure I just went back home. Maybe I stayed for the party. I don't remember. Usually at parties, the kids weren't as bad because like some of the parents would be there, so they wouldn't be able to like bully you as much. But eventually, like, very shortly after that, my brother got him, and we added him to the collection, and he's awesome. To finish up the trilogy of absolute villains that they made in this line is Chrome Dome. Chrome Dome, I thought he was pretty cool as a kid. Again, I wasn't a big robot guy. My brother thought he was like awesome. My brother was very impressed by any character who was like enormous. Even things. Like, he thought big buildings were cool. Like, he just thought big things were awesome. Like, it was like a sign of how, you know, badass something is. It's like Godzilla's huge, King Kong's huge, elephants are huge. You don't mess with any of those things. So the fact that Chrome Dome was shown off in the special Planet of the Turtleoids to be humongous, my brother thought that was awesome. To be honest, I thought it was cool, but I didn't like Chrome Dome as much as my brother did, definitely. This is probably the #1 hardest figure in the whole Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles line to make stand. He's one of them. I don't know, like Ace Duck's pretty hard, but this guy is so hard to get standing. Like, he's ridiculously hard to get standing. His legs are so skinny, his feet are so tiny, and they're just bent at this really weird angle that does not allow him to stand. But he can hold all of his weapons, you can plug them all into his belt, so that's always a plus for me. The main thing that really looks radical about the Chrome Dome figure is the vac metal. There's so much on him, almost the entire base of the figure and the head is done in vac metal. And although my copy is admittedly very worn and scratched and crummy looking, when you got this guy new, he just looked so cool, he was so shiny. The thing I remember most about Chrome Dome is when my brother got him. My brother got him for his birthday one year. And I remember the whole weekend before, I had already seen them. I saw them in my mom's closet when she was like showing me what she got him. And the whole weekend before, like the entire weekend, he just kept bugging me like, so what did I get? What did I get? What characters did I get? What Ninja Turtle toys did I get? Did I get Chrome Dome? Did I get this? Did I get that? He kept pestering me about Chrome Dome. And I kept telling him, I'm not going to tell you. It's a surprise. It's your birthday. I won't tell you. And I kept fighting it the whole weekend. I just kept telling him, I'm not going to tell you. And he just kept on doing it. And then at some point, like the night before his birthday, it was probably like 5 or 6 or so. We were in the backyard, but he was doing it again. He started asking me like, so did I get Chrome Dome? Who did I get? What Turtles toys did I get? And eventually I was just like, all right, yeah, you got Chrome Dome and you got, I forget who the other one was. It was some type of Leo. It was some Leo variant. And when I told him that, he was like, why did you tell me? I wanted to be surprised. He got mad at me. I'm like, are you kidding me right now? It felt like I was on a hidden camera show, like I was getting punked or something. I couldn't believe that was actually happening. And yeah, the next day he opened it up, he got Chrome Dome, and it doesn't even matter that it was spoiled, he was still super happy to have him. I think by that point we probably had all the new characters in the line. But yeah, Chrome Dome, he's cool. The next two I'm going to talk about are part of the Movie Star set. This was, as I said, when Secret of the Ooze came out. Wave 3 and Wave 4 were just when Turtle Mania was at its peak. Like, when these movies were coming out, the 1990 movie and Secret of the Ooze, this is when Ninja Turtles was at an all-time high. It was never bigger than then. Like, Turtles were everywhere at this time. You were watching them on TV. You were listening to the Coming Out of Their Shells tour. You were watching the movies. Everything you were doing was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles at this time. And they finally released movie-themed figures at this point. Because for the first movie, they didn't for some reason. But in this wave, they released Movie Star Leo, Movie Star Mike, Movie Star Raph, Movie Star Don, Movie Star Foot Soldier, Movie Star Splinter, Super Shredder, not Movie Star Shredder, just only Super Shredder, and Rahzar and Tokka. I'm only going to talk about Rahzar and Tokka here because, I mean, not only are they the only Movie Star ones I still have, other than the Jumbo Movie Star Leo and Movie Star Raph that I own, but they're also the only unique characters of the bunch. The rest of them, Splinter, the Turtles, the Foot Soldier, Shredder, I've talked about them already. So what I'm doing right now is I'm just talking about the unique character figures. I'll get to variants after I'm done with all the unique character waves. I'm mostly not doing side series. Like, I will not be covering all the unique characters that were made in the Toon Turtles line when we get to them, but I feel the need to cover some every now and then. I'll cover these Movie Star Turtles, and then I'll be covering a character in the Shogun line 2 waves from now. Just because I feel like they fit in more. They're unique mutant characters. They round out that whole series, you know, the unique mutant character series. So first we're going to look at Tokka. And while at first glance, Tokka looks awesome. Like, he looks really cool. The more you look at the figure, the more disappointing he becomes. Like, don't get me wrong, I still like this figure. He looks very cool. The color scheme is awesome, very nostalgic. The head sculpt is very cool. But it doesn't take long before you realize this guy is just made out of Slash's figure. They have the exact same body, the exact same legs, the exact same arms. He has different hands, different wrists, but the exact same biceps and shoulders. He doesn't exactly have the exact same armor pieces that are plugged into Slash. His are a little more unique, but that's a simple thing to do. Those are tiny little plastic pieces. The only thing that's really different are his hands, his head, and his paint job. His weapons are all just Slash's weapons, but done in black plastic rather than magenta. And that's extremely lazy, to be honest. The Turtles line almost never recycled parts early on. That was one thing that was beautiful about the line. So many other toy lines were just made out of recycled parts. I mean, when you really think about He-Man, when it comes to like arms and legs and chests, there's like 5 variants and they just mix and match them and then add extra armor pieces onto them to make new characters over the course of the line. I love the toy line, but it's very recycled. Where that one, the more it went on, they could afford to make more unique sculpts for certain characters. Ninja Turtles, it kind of seems like they, out of the gate, had more unique sculpts, and then they started to get more samey. The only time they really did that early on was the Turtles themselves shared the same torso, and they had mix and match legs, and their arms were all like exactly the same. But after that, they really never recycled parts. Later in the line, they did like Toon Shredder was just a recycled job, and Robotic Foot Soldier was a recycled job, and a bunch of them were just like they recycled figures. But early on, they didn't do that much. So Tokka's very disappointing, because if you look at Tokka in the movie, his shell looks very different. It's just like covered in jagged spikes, like huge, long, sharp spikes. Every inch of it is covered in them. Whereas this one, he just has a regular snapping turtle shell, you know, just has like a ridge down the middle and ridges on the side that have little spikes on them. It's Slash's shell. But it still all works. I understand why they did it, because the characters do have similar builds, but it's a little disappointing. But Tokka's still cool. Tokka and Rahzar were actually both my brother's figures growing up. Now, Rahzar is definitely a cooler figure, and I know he has some variants. I know he has like the red-nosed, but the standard original Rahzar is a very cool looking figure. Not as cool as it could have been, though. It doesn't look as much like Rahzar in the movie as it could have. He has kind of a bigger forehead and smaller mouth, whereas in the movie he had like a very big mouth. And he has like very bright colors, which I'm fine with. I love bright neon colors and everything. I'm all about that on Turtles toys. But the colors on Rahzar are a tad too bright for how menacing the character looked in the movie. He's not the greatest Rahzar figure, but he's still damn cool. I guess the only thing you can really give the toy over the movie one is that it resembles a wolf more. The movie looks more like a general monster, so I guess this one looks more like a wolf. Oh, let's ask a real wolf to find out. Mr. Wolf, does this look like a wolf to you? Does that look like one of your kind? Is that a wolf? You're not giving me any answers here. He's wagging his tail. I guess it's a wolf. The wolf approves. Oh, he's a good boy. My biggest problem with him, honestly, is that his hands are designed in this weird way that he doesn't really hold his accessories very well. You just gotta like smudge them in there. You just stuff them in and you hope that he holds them. It's not like a solid grip like the other figures have. His hands are just kind of open, like he's doing, you know, paper and rock, paper, scissors. My Rahzar is also busted. His neck joint is broken, so his head just kind of rattles. He didn't come like this, but as I said, in 2006, I was stupid and I was very rough with the figures. I would just kind of throw them in a drawer and close it. And a lot of times when I did that, they'd break. Also, my spider accessory is broken on Rahzar, but that actually did come like that. Rahzar and Tokka were two of those figures that we saw at our friend's house. We had these two friends that would come over and sleep over sometimes, and they'd bring their turtles, or we'd go over their place and look at their turtles. They'd come to ours and they'd look at our turtles and we'd just play with them and stuff all night. So we were like simultaneously collecting turtles, and these were awesome guys. Never had any problem with these two. But they were those kids who just always had more than us. Like if we just got a mother load of turtles, we were so happy. We'd go to their house and find out they got all of that and 5 more. So it was like, They always had more than us. They always got them before we did. So I remember vividly sitting in their backyard one time and looking at Tokka and Rahzar before we ever got the figures and just like staring at every inch of them and thinking they were so cool looking. But we eventually got them, and honestly, once we got them, I never really stopped and looked at them as much as I did before we owned them. But they're very cool figures, and it's very cool they made them. They're necessary, even if they were actually a disappointment in the movie, because we all really wanted Bebop and Rocksteady. Alright, now onto the characters where it's not really clear if they're heroes or villains. It kind of just changes depending on what medium you're looking at. Again, in the comics, the cartoon show, the toys, they're always saying something different. And in one of their cases, they look completely different. So I'm going to start with Tattoo. Tattoo was one of those rare cases where, even though he was a human character, and as I said as a kid, I wasn't crazy about the human characters. I was usually more into the mutants. For some reason, me and my brother thought he was awesome. We didn't even think of sumo wrestlers as being in the same league as humans. My brother just thought they were awesome. He thought they were the biggest, most unstoppable thing in the world. He thought of them as I don't even know. I don't even think he even thought they were human. He thought of them as their own species, sumo wrestler. That's its own thing. But he really liked them. So naturally, I thought they were cool because he hyped them up so much. So when Tattoo came out, we thought he was awesome. I remember getting him. It was actually my figure. We got him at Toys R Us. And I remember we were both there. And as we were driving home, we were in the back seat. We were just holding the package with him in it. And for some reason, the figure just felt so much heavier than any other Turtles figure. Now when I hold him, he feels no heavier than any other figure. But for some reason, as a kid, he felt really dense. He felt heavy as heck. And I'm not really sure why that is. Even though he's clearly a hollow figure like everyone else, I just thought oh man, he's so big and so powerful. He weighs more than everybody else. His figure's kind of weird. It's sort of like Ace Ducks, where it has these metal joints here that you can see, and rotating ball joints at the shoulders. They really never did that for most other figures. I don't know if there's any other ones that have that. But he's sort of a weird figure. His legs are kind of weird too. He just sort of has really, really big knees and feet immediately underneath them. He has animal knees. But he's a very simple figure, to be honest. And that was intentional because he actually comes with a bunch of tattoos. They're just these tattoo designs of dragons and fire and all this stuff. I think he even came with a mom tattoo. And you can put them all over his body. You could put them wherever you want. So he's sort of like Mondo Gecko in that when you find a used tattoo today, unless he's missing all of his stickers, they're not on him, they all rubbed off like mine, he's basically going to be a unique tattoo figure because the tattoos will never be in the same place twice. Everyone put them in different spots. I think even more so than Mondo Gecko. Mondo Gecko had more obvious designated spots you could put them. Whereas Tattoo, you can really put them anywhere. I think that's even sort of the reason why his knees are so awkwardly shaped, or his thighs as a whole, his legs, is because they just wanted them to be kind of like a flat canvas for you to be able to easily put these decals on. And as a kid, we did put the stickers on him, but the thing is, the more you play with this figure, it's very easy for those decals to start peeling and falling off. So really, you should get the decals fresh and assemble them on a tattoo figure that you intend to just display, not one that you're going to play with. I really should get a sheet of the decals at some point, or just a new tattoo figure. He's actually surprisingly one of the cheaper turtle figures. He's very affordable last time I checked. If you want to get a tattoo with all of his pieces, it's really not that expensive. You can get him new in his package for very cheap, actually. I don't know if that's due to him being unpopular or him being very popular. I'm assuming he was popular then because typically the unpopular ones have become the more expensive and sought after figures these days. But no one really ever seems to talk about Tattoo. I think he's one that I liked more as a kid, but no one else really acknowledged. Now the toys, I believe, always said he was a hero. And I always thought of him as a hero as a kid. But his one appearance in the cartoon, he's a villain. And he's a mutant somehow because they beat him up and then he turns into a gerbil, like a hamster, and crawls away. Why the heck would a hamster turn into a sumo wrestler? I don't get it. It's so weird. Very, very, very weird moment in the cartoon. I haven't seen that special in ages though, so I don't remember if there was an explanation for that. And I did read an Archie comic with him in, but it was so long ago I barely remember what was happening in it. But I believe he was like a villain, but not really like a villain. Like they had to fight him, but I don't believe he was an actual villain. But I don't know. I think he was still supposed to generally be a good guy, but they had to fight him for whatever reason. I could be wrong. But yeah, Tattoo's a cool figure. He only really comes with the one accessory. He comes with the staff. I guess he and Mondo Gecko only came with one plastic accessory because they came with all the stickers. The other character that it's hard to say whether he's a villain or a hero is Wyrm. In most depictions of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Wyrm is a villain. He seems to pretty much always be a villain. He was a villain in the comics. He's a villain in the 2012 show. He's a villain in the animated commercial for this toy wave. But then the toy line itself calls him a hero all the time. So that was really bizarre. I never got why the action figure line called him a hero when everything else called him a villain. And by the way, that commercial was awesome. That really misled me as a kid because I remember seeing that one day with my dad. I was on the couch with my dad and he was just watching TV. And I was so excited that a Turtles commercial came on. And it showed Chrome Dome, Ground Chuck, Dirtbag, and Wyrm. But it showed like little animated moments of them. And as a kid, I didn't notice the difference between animation quality of like the cartoon show and this commercial. I thought those were actual clips from the cartoon. So I was always waiting to finally see that Wyrm episode, and he never appears in the cartoon. So that was a little disappointing.
Not so fast, turtle scum!
But as I've stated before, Wyrm I got in that bunch of figures I got in Vermont for my birthday that one summer. And I really liked this figure. I still really like this figure. I think he's an awesome character. Just a really, really fun design. The colors are crazy. He's got this like bright green outfit and backwards cap. He's sort of dressed like a janitor. He's part of like the sanitation company, but then he got mutated into a flatworm. You know, he works for the desanitation company. But he just has a lot of really clever stuff going on here. Like how his fingers look like earthworms. He's got like leeches and earthworms all over his body. If you look at his body, there actually is the normal worm body there. And there's just sort of human appendages growing off of it. Like you can see the human parts mixed in with the worm. So he's really just this one big worm here. But then he has two human arms and one human leg just kind of sprouting out in spots. And it's a really clever way of making him have four limbs, but still be a worm, essentially. He came with a bunch of little red worms that you could put in his mouth, but I never got those when I got the figure back. And as a kid, I lost those incredibly quick. He also has this cool action feature. It doesn't work that good, but when you tug on the hair upward, his eyes will bug out of his head. It's just a lot of fun. He has a really fun design. I love all like the purple slime jam stuff pouring out of his mouth. Like he's just this sloppy, gross character, and it's awesome. He has this slimy hammer, and you can just see there's like worms crawling in and out of all the cracks in the hammer. He comes with this crazy wrench with an angry porcupine on it. He just has such weird stuff. Even his belt looks like a giant worm, or like worms linked together. And just the fact that he's a flatworm and there's leeches and earthworms and everything. There's just like this great variety of worms. For a character just named Wyrm, even if it's spelled wrong, it's pretty cool that they were able to cover every type of worm. So pretty good name for him, I guess. He's a really fun design. His head isn't articulated, but that's because his mouth opens and closes. And his head is so big that it would be kind of hard to articulate that head. One thing I always found a little weird was on the inside of his mouth, where the top part of his head is separated from the bottom, there's like a worm kind of going across there. And that's the only worm I think is in a weird spot. I guess they just would rather have a detail that looks like something you would see on his body rather than just like a plastic peg there to break up the sculpt. So I guess that's why they did that. But it kind of ends up making it look like he doesn't have a throat. Like it just all sealed up in here. It's weird. They definitely improved the opening and closing mouth mechanic since Leatherhead. You can't pop his head off. If you take off the top of Wyrm's head, you broke the figure. So it's much sturdier. You don't have to worry about losing his head or anything. Wyrm is just a really fun figure. I really liked him as a kid, and I still really like him. I've always had fond memories of Wyrm. Awesome figure. I love Wyrm. All right, now we're going to get into the actual heroes. Let's talk about Zak the Neutrino. It's about damn time they made a Neutrino figure in this line. For characters who were introduced in the first season and were such commonly recurring heroes in the cartoon, it is so weird that it took them 4 action figure waves to make only one of them, and then the other 2 wouldn't get made until the Toon series later on. The Neutrinos as a whole are kind of an anomaly to me. See, when I was a little kid, I hated them. I thought they were so lame. I thought they looked stupid. I hated their voices. I never got why they were there. I never got why they showed up so frequently in the cartoon. I just thought, like, they're such boring characters. We only saw characters like Ray Fillet and Mona Lisa like one time, but boy did we get a lot of Neutrinos. And honestly, I remember a lot of kids thought the Neutrinos were cool. I remember even my sister, who was not part of Turtle Mania, like, obviously she was exposed to it all the time because she was living in a house with 2 boys who loved Ninja Turtles. But even she would say sometimes on the bus, like her and some of the other girls, like some of her friends on the bus would play Turtles, like act it out on the bus to school. After the day before, if there was an episode with like the Neutrinos showing up, they would all call dibs on being Kala. They all thought Kala was like the coolest character. And they like looked forward to Kala showing up. If the Neutrinos showed up, that was like, oh, this is a good episode. Stuff's getting crazy here. So like most other kids from what I remember thought the Neutrinos were really cool. And they were clearly supposed to be really cool. But as a kid, I didn't like them. And as I got older and older, I started to actually think they were a bit cooler than I thought they were. And then when I got back into Ninja Turtles, by like 2007 or so, I actually really liked the Neutrinos. I started thinking they were really cool. I dug the whole like 50s, 60s kind of James Dean attitude they had. They were this huge throwback. You know, they rode around in a flying convertible and they called everyone Daddy-O. And it was just like, they were really cool, honestly. They're actually really fun characters. And they were a huge part. I mean, Kala is the love interest of Michelangelo. So it's like, they were recurring characters. Major parts of the story. They were like basically Krang's adversaries on Dimension X. They were like the group of teenagers that Krang had to deal with on Dimension X, while the Turtles were the teenagers that Shredder had to deal with on Earth. But the funny thing is, now that I like the Neutrinos, and I think they're actually really fun characters, nobody likes them anymore. If anything, it seems like nobody even remembers they existed. When people talk about classic Turtles characters from like the 87 series, they'll remember every random character before remembering the Neutrinos. They'll remember Muckman and Joe Eyeball and Mutagen Man and Ray Fillet and all these crazy characters before they ever remember the Neutrinos who showed up all the time in the show. I feel like even when they ever do merchandise for the 87 show, which they do all the time, and I'm shocked at what kind of crazy character choices they've done. I mean, there's been merchandise for Sergeant Bananas and Rahzar and Tokka and just all these crazy character choices that I never thought would get merchandise again. They never ever do the Neutrinos. The Neutrinos are just like erased from history. And anytime there's a new iteration of the Turtles, they never put the Neutrinos in. Like they never even put them in any way, shape, or form. There was one episode of the 2012 show where they called these like micro little organism things Neutrinos, but it was just the name. Like many things in the 2012 series, it was really just the name alone that was a reference to the original thing. They never actually had characters who represented the Neutrinos in the cartoon. The Neutrinos have been absent in Turtles media since the 87 cartoon. So it's so weird that they're just forgotten. And even though Kala was definitely the most popular one back in the day, Zak was supposed to be the leader, so Zak got the first toy. And also, you know, like, they never made toys for female characters back then. It was very rare. So Zak got the first figure. And by the way, I always found it kind of confusing that there was 2 characters in Ninja Turtles named Zak. I mean, it's not confusing. You remember who's who. But it's just kind of weird. Usually properties don't do that. Like, you wouldn't just name 2 characters John or Mike or something. Like, usually you want the characters to stand out more. But there was 2 characters named Zak. And Zak was just considered one of those awesome names back in the day. Like, if you had the name Zak, you were cool. Even Jack the Lego Maniac was upgraded into Zak the Lego Maniac in the 90s. Zak, Max, like those names were just considered so cool back in the late 80s and early 90s. But you had Zak the 5th Turtle, who was like a random little kid who really liked the Ninja Turtles and befriended them and would dress up as a Ninja Turtle. And then you had Zak the Neutrino, who was the leader of the Neutrinos. As a kid, honestly, I knew his name was Zak, but I wasn't sure if he was a boy or a girl, actually, as a kid. I usually thought of him more as a girl. I thought of Dask as the only one who was a guy. And I usually forgot about Dask, but I wasn't quite sure about Zak. And I never had this figure as a kid. Those two friends I was talking about, those real cool ones, they had him. But as a kid, I didn't care. I did not like the Neutrinos. So I didn't care about having Zak. Even though, I mean, look at this figure. This thing is awesome. Like, look at how radical this dude is. Like, look at that face he has. He's got that snarl on his face. He's got those crazy cool funky sunglasses. He's got that crazy magenta hair swooshed back. He's got all this neon yellow all over him, this crazy space tech. He's on a hoverboard. Like, this guy is awesome. And even though I never had this toy as a kid, just due to the color scheme and everything and like what's supposed to be hip on him, he's so reminiscent of the time. He ends up being extremely nostalgic. Not like the craziest, most interesting turtle figure ever, but a very cool one. It's actually interesting to note that the Neutrinos are some of the only characters they ever made figures of that are actually just standing up straight. They're really not in this crazy squat action pose. But yeah, I'd like to see the Neutrinos come back at some point. They were such important characters back in the day. It's kind of sad to see them just completely disappear from Turtles. Next up is Walkabout. Walkabout is a character that's pretty easy to forget about. He's cool, but there was just so many mutants at this time that the less interesting ones usually get forgotten. To be honest, the villains were so much more memorable after a while than the heroes. Also, a lot of the heroes in this wave, like Walkabout and Sergeant Bananas, they never appeared in the cartoon. So most people don't know they existed unless they collected the toy line. Walkabout was basically Crocodile Dundee, just that like Australian stereotype at the time. I think it's kind of funny how he's wearing a fanny pack rather than having a pouch, because he's a male kangaroo, so he doesn't have a pouch, but he wears a fanny pack. He did come with a little Joey, though, named Kid Kangi, but I don't own him yet. I'm also missing the boomerang. He came with this cool backpack, but it actually doesn't do anything. You can't store anything in it, and nothing clips to it, so it's just for show, but it looks pretty cool. Walkabout is one of those weird figures that has, like, unique articulation that no other figure has, and that's in his knees. He has these weird kind of hinge joints in his knees that just move forward and back, and I guess it's so you can kind of emulate the movement of a kangaroo's legs as they hop, but I mean, that's kind of hard to fluently just do that as you're moving the figure, so it just kind of ends up leading him to having kind of a boring pose. And I've never been a big fan of joints like this. It's something I say a lot, that I'm not a huge fan of overly articulated figures. I know today that's very popular to have, like, the more articulation, the better. But I'm never for articulation that breaks up the sculpt. Like, there's a lot of awesome figures that, you know, companies like NECA and Super 7 and stuff make. They make great figures. But a personal preference of mine is that I'm not crazy about articulation that breaks up the sculpt. And when you have those ab crunches and stuff, like those ones where it looks like the pectoral muscles aren't connected to the rest of the torso, they're kind of floating above them. And when the knees bend and you can see this joint widening inside of them, it looks very weird. It just kind of makes every character look like a robot. And I get it, it's cool that you can put them in pretty much any pose. I understand the appeal, but for me personally, I would kind of just rather the figure come with a cool pre-made pose that with some articulation, so I can customize it a little bit, like move the head, move the arms, maybe rotate the torso a little bit. But when they're overly articulated, I feel like it kind of ruins the look of the figure for me. It just makes them look robotic and like they're broken up into a bunch of pieces and Frankensteined back together. It's just a personal preference of mine. I know most people like that. I'm just not really into that. And Walkabout kinda has that going on. Not too much. Obviously not to the degree of new figures that will have like 40 points of articulation or something. This guy still has very limited articulation. But I'm not a huge fan of his articulation, to be honest. This guy was mine as a kid. I don't really have many noteworthy memories involving Walkabout. He was a cool figure. I liked him, but he doesn't really stand out. Next up is Sergeant Bananas. My copy of Sergeant Bananas now is pretty boring because he's missing his gun and he's missing Larry Lemur. his little sidekick buddy. All I have is the belt. I had like Iguana Gun, but it's another case like Mutagen Man's. It fell behind a dresser and somehow I just never saw it again. It just vanished. He's another interesting figure in that he's kind of like Splinter and Leatherhead, where they gave him more of the build that the animal he's based on actually has in the wild. He's very hunched over with really long arms and very short legs. He has the anatomy of a gorilla. One thing that I think is very cool about this figure, though, is this arm can obviously be used to hold him up, and then the other arm is meant to hold the gun. But you can also use this long arm to hang him from things. He can grab onto stuff like a branch and you can kind of just hang him. And honestly, for a while, when I had them displayed in my last place I lived in, I actually did have him hanging from part of a shelf above the rest of the figures. And it actually looked really cool. I just can't do that with the shelving I have now. I don't know if that was intentional, but if so, it works really well, honestly. I don't have a terrible amount to say about Sergeant Bananas. Unfortunately, the more we get into this wave, the less I have to say, because I started with the more interesting characters, and I'm kind of ending on the ones that I like, but they don't really stand out to me. Like I said, the villains were much more memorable in this wave than the heroes were. But that's not to say anything bad about Sergeant Bananas. He's an awesome character. Although I never quite got why his shirt just says Gorilla on it. Like, I get the spelling. It's like guerrilla warfare. So, like, I get the joke. He's like a war gorilla because there's guerrilla warfare. But I don't get why it's just Gorilla. I don't know what that's all about. Very fun character, though. And there we go. That's all of Wave 4 when it comes to original characters. Now, I know there was Super Shredder for the movie Turtles, but the way I look at it is Super Shredder is just Shredder. He's not a unique character. I'm specifically only talking unique characters. Like, they never had figures before. So, that in mind, this is everything from this wave. I know there was plenty of other figures, but bear with me. We're just going by these rules right now. We'll do variants of characters later on. But anyway, let's rank these guys. And honestly, it's going to be really hard to rank these guys because they're all really close in how cool they are. I honestly really like a lot of these figures a lot. Like, this is a great set. I don't think that the greatness of it quite matches the quality of the greatness of Wave 3, because Wave 3, when it's at its best, is the best the line ever saw. But I do think that the greatness in this set is more consistent. Like, they're all very close in how much I like them. So, yeah, this list, really, more than anyone I've done so far, this could change, like, any day depending on how I'm feeling. These figures are all awesome. But I feel like always, number one would be Wyrm. I just really like that figure. Even when I wasn't into Turtles for some years, like when I was in high school and I was too cool for everything, I'd still remember Wyrm sometimes and try to draw him from memory because he was just such a crazy character design. I always liked him. Number two, I would probably say, is Dirtbag. Groundchuck and Dirtbag are both awesome, but I think Dirtbag's a little bit cooler. He's just something a little more menacing about him. And his color scheme just really works and everything. Even though he looks nothing like a mole, you know, he looks like a weasel or something. But he's just a cool figure. I like him a lot. Number three, I would say, is Groundchuck. It's a pretty flawed figure in that he's just so small. I kind of wish he was bigger because he's clearly supposed to be a really big character. But it's a special figure for me. I got it for my birthday. I remember liking it a lot as a kid. So I really like him. So Groundchuck's number three. Number four, this is where it starts getting really hard. Number four, I would say, my childhood self would punch me in the face right now if you heard me say this. But in all honesty, I'd probably say Zak the Neutrino is number four. He's just a really cool figure. All the characters who were regulars in the cartoon show, they usually didn't get good figures. You know, Shredder, Splinter, April, and Casey Jones got a good figure, but not this good. I feel like they really went all out with Zak. Zak's figure is really cool. So I would definitely give him number four. You know, he's got a hoverboard, he's got a techno backpack, he's got those shades. Like, he's an awesome figure, even though I didn't have him as a kid. The number five, I would say, is Chrome Dome. He'd be a little lower than the other ones. I think he would go above Zak because he's just such a cool design, but he's like the worst figure at standing in the entire line, probably. He's like up there with April O'Neil, just like a horrible figure to stand. His feet are so tiny, it's really hard to stand him up. And yeah, I know when I was a kid, I wasn't that into him. I wasn't as into him as my brother was, but he's cool. And I mean, the Vac metal is just awesome. The Vac metal alone ranks him high. All right, now we're down to the last 5. We're halfway through this. This is where it gets really tough because these remaining 5 are all really cool. Not quite as cool as the 5 I just mentioned, but they're really cool, and it's really tough to choose between them. I'd say number 6 I'll give to Tattoo. He has a good articulation. He has a cool sculpt. I remember really liking him as a kid, and the whole tattoo stick-on thing is just a cool idea. It's a cool gimmick. Next, I would say Rahzar. It's not the best Rahzar figure ever, but it's a cool Rahzar figure. I like it a lot. My biggest problem is just that his hands are kind of awkward when it comes to holding his accessories. After that, I'd probably say Walkabout. If you asked me as a kid, I probably would have put Sergeant Bananas before Walkabout, but I feel like Walkabout has a bit more of an interesting sculpt than Sergeant Bananas. There's more going on. He has a cooler design. But then I'd say after that is Sergeant Bananas. Still an awesome figure. Like I said, there's no figure I dislike in this entire wave. But I'd put him closer to the bottom, I think. He's very limited in like how you can pose him. He's always in that gorilla pose. And he just doesn't have a ton of interesting detail on him. He's mostly just wearing that camo onesie. And then at the very bottom, even though I think it's actually a really cool looking figure, I have to put Tokka, simply just because, I mean, he's just made out of Slash. He's a hack job. So it's just really lazy. Even his accessories are just recycled accessories of Slash's. His belt is the exact same belt. It's just black, and they put a foot logo on it instead of the S. And honestly, even in later releases of Slash, when he got the mustard belly, they gave him a black belt also. So it's like, Tokka's just not an interesting figure compared to the other ones because he's just a rehash of something we had a year prior. So yeah, that's all of them. So next time we're going to get into Wave 5 of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and it's going to be considerably smaller than this one. This is when they really started getting smaller and smaller. We only have 2 more left. Wave 5 is smaller than this, and Wave 6 is even smaller than that. So hope you look forward to it. It'll be easier to edit, that's for sure. So see you next time, guys. Do all the liking and subscribing and the sharing and the bell stuff.